welcome to another episode of Kicking It with Coco. And this is episode 5. So if you missed the last episode, you might want to go over there and check that out right now. It was a very good episode. You don't want to miss it. So you can listen to it now or you can listen to it later. Just make sure you go and check it out. Before I get into the episode, I need to put my disclaimer out there. Any and everything that I talk about on my podcast comes from research that I've done or opinions, and my opinion is going to always be present in every episode. The other opinions that I have are from people that I know, both men and women, or they might come from the research that I've done within that research. So just know that it's going to be a combination of the two. Also, before I get into the episode, I want to let everyone know that with BDSM, safety and consent are always present. So no matter what you see or what you hear, everything that's happening has been consented to and safety has been established. There has been a safe word or a safe signal, or depending on what's going on, there have been a safe word and a safe signal. Now, let's get into what we're about to be, talking about right now. We are going to go into a different room. Last episode, we went into the Dom and Sub room. This time, we're going to take a little bit more of a trip. We're going to walk a little bit further on down the hallway, and we're going to get into some bondage and discipline. We're going to go and see what they're doing in there. So, if you are triggered by anything that has to do with bondage and discipline, you might not want to listen. You might want to just stop listening right now. But if you are okay with it and you want to, get in on the little juiciness of it all, then stick around. This is exactly what you need and exactly what you're going to want to hear. So, what we're going to get started with for bondage and discipline. First of all, bondage and discipline are the B and the D in BDSM. We're just going to put that out there right now so y'all understand that if you don't understand it. Some people know and some people don't, but for those who don't, I gotta let them know, y'all. I gotta tell them. So, before I forget, for those of you who don't know what BDSM means, it's bondage and discipline, dominance and sub, which means dom and sub. It means dominance and submissive, and sadism and masochism. So that's BDSM for you. Now, what I do want to also let y'all know is that with BDSM, it's not for you to just be doing with just anybody. It is something that requires a lot of trust. It requires you to be very vulnerable because people are getting into your head and you are getting into their heads. If you are a dom or a top or a master, you are going into someone's head and you are really messing with things in there. Even though they're consenting to it, it's really deep because it involves a lot of psychological things that are happening because it's control. It's submission and control, submission and dominance. So that's the dom sub thing. And then with the bondage and discipline, you get into the master and slave roles. And I know that that's kind of triggering for some people, but that's what it is in the BDSM world. So, we're going to get into a few ways to punish your slave in the bedroom. And if the word slave is triggering for you, then you might want to just stop listening. Like, don't even bother going any further, because I'm not gonna stop saying it. Anyway, moving right along. Okay, so some of the things are sensory deprivation. Now, sensory deprivation is cutting off all of the sensory inputs. And we all know what those are. So whatever way you want to punish your slave in that manner, you can do. You can make it so they can't hear anything by putting earplugs in their ears, and they have to leave them in until you tell them to take them out. You can cut off their sight. You can blindfold them, or you can lock them in a pitch black room for as long as you want them to be in there. You can also gag them so they can't speak with a gag ball or whatever you and your slave agree upon that can be used as punishment in that way. And there are a few others, but those were the ones that stood out to me the most. There's also spanking and whipping on different levels. Now, I'm not going to get into exactly what those levels are, because I have so much to talk to y'all about with this particular episode, so I had to kind of narrow things down. But as I always say, if there is something that I'm saying in any episode and you want to know more about it, just Google it and you will have your answer. Google, YouTube, and I guarantee you'll find the answer to your question. There's also breath play, which goes into the sensory deprivation. And breath play is where you cut off their oxygen for a certain period of time. There's also edging. Now, edging is a form of discipline because you are basically getting your sub or your slave to the point of climax, but you're not going to allow them to climax. They're not allowed to come until you tell them that they can. And they have to hold that until you say otherwise. And if they don't do that, then they suffer even more of a punishment because they did not listen. I have been involved in edge play where I was the one doing the edging. I have done it several times. There are quite a few men who love for me to tell them when they can come or if they can come, and I tell them either yes or no, or yeah, you can do it now, or no, I don't want you to come yet. Like, you cannot. Like, don't. And they won't. At least they say they haven't, but you get the picture. Okay, so now we're gonna get into some pain-based BDSM punishments. Now, if you are not into pain as pleasure, then bondage and discipline really isn't gonna be for you. But I'm the type of woman who enjoys certain types of pain as pleasure. And that goes into me being, where I like to be submissive. So if you're telling me to do something while we're fucking and I don't do it, then whatever you do as a punishment for that turns me on. Or if I repeatedly say, like, no, I'm not doing that, but you are in my ear like, yes, the fuck you are gonna do it. You better do what the fuck I say. Like, I told you to do this. You better do it. And you can call me a bitch. You can call me a slut. Like, I will love it. I'm just being real. I'm gonna love it all. You can choke me. You can pull my hair. You can spank me. You can do those things, and I'm going to just love it. Next is, okay, not next, but first, there is vigorously spanking. So I really don't need to go into much detail about that because we're all familiar with what it means to be spanked in a vigorous manner. But there's a technique to it. And it doesn't always occur during sexual activity. It doesn't always occur, while you're having sex. Being spanked can be used as punishment, even when there's no intercourse involved. So say your slave or your sub has done something that you told them not to do or that you don't like, you can actually punish them by spanking them with a paddle. You can use a whip. You can flog them. It just all depends on or you can use your hand, your bare hand, or you can use a gloved hand with a rubber glove or a leather glove. Whatever you and your slave or sub agree upon that are acceptable objects for that type of punishment, you can choose between them. Sometimes you might, some people only want one. Some people don't mind if you pick between a variety of those things. But it's just, again, it comes down to what is agreed upon. The other one, now this one, y'all, is extreme. It's extreme. Now, I don't think I would be comfortable doing this to someone, but there are some people, obviously, who don't mind being on the receiving end of this, and there are people who obviously don't mind being on the giving end of it, and this is called the margarita spanking. These are punishments that I found from a female dom on YouTube, and I forgot her name, and I'm so sorry, y'all, but I meant to write it down, and I thought I did, but I'm looking at my notes now, and I did not write her name down. But she is she's a professional, so I was really intrigued by what she was saying. Now, the margarita spanking is where you spank the sub to the point of highly tender, preferably broken skin. Yes, like break the skin on their ass. That's what they're saying. And then after that happens, you squirt lemon juice and sprinkle salt on their wounded rump. Yes, literally salt and lemon juice. And then, of course, you would clean it thoroughly with the appropriate, ointments and stuff like that. But again, this has to be something that's consented to. You can't just decide that this is what you're going to do to your sub and that y'all haven't agreed upon this, because doing something like this and it hasn't been discussed and consent hasn't been given can really create a huge problem, and shit can go left when you just out here doing stuff and you don't know what the hell you're doing in the BDSM world, and you just have not asked your sub or told them that this is something you were thinking about. Are they okay with it? You don't ever want to do that. You always want to be mindful of what they are willing to allow you to do to them, even though you are the one in control, because it goes back to another episode where I was talking about the exchange of power. There is no power to be exchanged if there isn't any power in play in the first place. So the sub has to relinquish their power to the dom in order for the dom to have power in the first place. So now there's an exchange here. But the dom can't just feel like because they are the dom, whether it's a male or a man, a male or a female dom, they can't just feel like because that's what role they are in, that they can just do whatever they want. It doesn't work like that. You still have to get that consent from the sub to be able to take certain control over them, certain types of control over them. The next one is making them endure a thorough waxing. Now, if you are a male sub, waxing is something that a lot of men cannot withstand. They can't take that pain, that rip off. So I think that for a man, like if you're dominating a man, whether you're a male dom or a female dom, and you are dominating a male sub, I think that a waxing would be really good, because it, like I said, a lot of men can't handle that. Like I've seen men just try it out just to see what we go through when we get anything on us waxed, and the screams are just crazy hilarious. Like they can't stand it. So I think that's a great form of punishment. For a woman, not so much, unless she's like, her pain tolerance is extremely low and she really can't tolerate that, that fast rip off like that. If she can't tolerate it, then yeah, that would be a great punishment for her as well. But I know it would be an awesome one for a man. The next one is you can make them write lines of remorse. At least 100 lines on a timer. So what you would do is you would have, like when you were in elementary school and you were talking in class and your teacher kept telling you not to talk. And well, for me, I'm a 70s baby. So when I was in elementary school, if we were talking and the teacher kept telling us not to talk, we would have to go home and write, on a piece of paper, and I don't even know if teachers still do this, or when they stopped doing it, but we would have to go home and write 100 times, "I will not talk," and bring it back. We'd have to start it in class, and if you didn't finish it in class, you would have to take it home. And some teachers would make it just be your homework because you weren't about to take up their class time writing no punishment. You were going to take that home, plus the homework that they were already giving you, you were going to have to do that. So with the sub, you would make them write 100 lines of whatever it is you want them to say pertaining to their remorse. And you would set a timer for that. However long you want the timer to stay on is how long it would stay on. And if they don't finish within that time period, now they suffer an even deeper punishment because they didn't finish. Which could be exciting, because now you could like add on to the punishment. You can add more lines with the timer on again, or you can add another part of something else to that punishment. It's up to you. You're in control as the dom. You can also limit their sleep for a few days. Now, if you don't live with them, you could do this like by monitoring them with a camera. And you have to pay very close attention to this, because sleep deprivation can get unhealthy really fast. And I know this for a fact because I have literally been so exhausted before, to the point where I felt like my body was literally starting to shut down on me. Because your body, would be like, look, you can either like lay me down, or I'm going to lay you down. Like, which I'm going to do it for you. So you can make a decision. Like, you can give me some sleep, or we're going to do this shit my way, and I'm just going to shut down on you. And then we can be up in somebody's ER, and we can figure it out after that. There have been cases where people have actually ended up in the hospital due to exhaustion because they're not getting enough rest. And lack of sleep if you have too much of that, it can literally take you right on out. You need sleep just as much as you need food, water, and air to breathe. You need sleep like that too. So that's why if you choose to do that, you need to really be paying attention to them, like their behaviors and everything, and make sure that you're not prolonging the sleep deprivation for too long of a period, because like I just said, it could get bad and you don't want that. Next is, now if they've abused their speaking privileges and disrespected you verbally, you can wash their mouth out with soap, or you can make them wear a soap gag. Yes, I did say a soap gag, which is like a gag ball, but it's soap instead of a ball. So I'm pretty sure that y'all are familiar with what gag balls are. Now, if you don't know what a gag ball is, it is an actual ball that sits inside of this little harness, and the ball goes inside of the sub's mouth, and it gets fastened to their face behind the neck so that it stays in place. And this ball is, used in whichever way the dom and the sub agree for it to be used. Sometimes it's used during sex, sometimes it's used during bondage. It just depends. But as a punishment, you can use soap instead, like a bar of soap. You can also, back to what I mentioned before, lock them in a dark room, and upon release, like after you decide to let them out, and to extend that punishment, you can make them watch their least favorite movie, listen to their least favorite song or podcast very loudly on repeat until you decide to turn it off. And they have to sit there and watch whatever it is or listen to whatever it is. They can't get up and walk away. They can't say they don't want to see it or listen to it. They have to literally sit there, and you can just keep it on repeat until you decide to stop. And for me, that's some torture, because when I don't like something, I don't fucking like it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see, especially if it's a song. Like, if it's a song that I can't stand, I immediately want it turned off. There is no, I'm going to listen to this. No. I don't want to hear it. So if you decide to punish me in that way, I'm going to be heated. Because then it's going to get stuck in my mind, in my brain, and I'm going to be singing it. Also, you can make them hold their urine. But if you decide to make them hold their urine, then you have to pay very close attention to that, because, bodies can only hold urine for so long before it starts to become painful. And I have been in that situation before, because where I was at the time, there was no bathroom around. So I was holding my pee to the point where it got to be extremely painful. Like, it was just so uncomfortable. Now, you got to be paying attention also because you know that the longer you hold your urine, you're putting a strain on your bladder and your kidneys. So you really want to be paying attention to somebody if that's the form of punishment that you choose to give them. Also, if you don't want to do that, you can make them wear a pair of pants that you splashed water, like strategically splashed water on to make it look like they pissed on themselves. And then you take them out in public and you just walk around with them and let everybody think that they peed on themselves. And they can't tell anybody who's looking at them crazy or laughing or pointing or whatever. They can't say, oh, this is just water. They have to endure the humiliation. And also, this, when it gets into spanking, we're only talking about consenting adults. That's it. We're not talking about child abuse or anything like that. It's just, this is for consenting adults. And often long-term marriages and relationships use this to infuse better manners for both partners, to keep a sense of order within their role. So some people, this is just how they actually operate within their marriages and relationships. Self-spanking. Now, self-spanking is for people who are not coupled with a sadist or a dom. So if these are people who don't have anyone to dominate them, but they want to punish themselves with spanking, so they would spank themselves in a way that is gratifying to them as a suitable form of punishment. And then there's erotic spanking. Now, this is used as a means of foreplay to lead partners into a sexual scene. Now, as the giver, it's important that you don't underestimate the power of soft rubs before and in between the swats. So, before you get ready to spank your sub, kind of rub on them. You can rub their ass or their back, or they're, playing their hair, or if it's a man, rub his head. If he has locks, playing his locks, that type of thing, and then swat. And in between each swat, you kind of just you keep doing that, and it's a turn on, because it's you're touching them in a way that's arousing them, and then you come in with that swat, and that's even more of a turn on, because they want you to do that. But in between the swats, you're letting them know, I still want to really touch on you, and I want you to feel good. I want you to feel really good, but I know once I swat you, you're going to feel even better, because this is what turns you on. So you can do that as well. And also, when you're doing that, those soft touches, they start to anticipate the next swat, which is awesome. And the giver's goal is to find the sweet spot between mood-killing aggression and where it's too soft. So what you want to do is you want to be just in the middle with your spanking. You don't want it to be too aggressive, and you don't want it to be little taps to where they're what the I can't even feel this. You gotta find the sweet spot when you're doing it. So moving right along. Now, I have so much more to talk about with this, but for the sake of this episode, I'm probably not going to be able to fit it all in. I'm not sure, but I'm going to try. Now, this is from the Medical News Today. This is from Medical News Today, and it's called What to Know About Bondage Sex. Now, this is an article that I found when I was looking up something to take notes on for bondage and discipline, and this is very interesting. Now, bondage sex is described as a form of sex play that involves consensually tying or restraining a partner in a sex position to give or receive sexual pleasure. Now, bondage represents the B in BDSM. It comprises 3 separate but combinable elements, which are bondage and discipline, dominance and submission, and sadism and masochism. Now, some may refer to it as a kink, And it's an umbrella term to commonly describe sexual practices that fall outside of normative societal standards. So, it's a consensual sexual activity that involves using restraints to restrict a partner's respectful form of sexual activity, which separates it from sexual and domestic abuse. Now, this falls under the umbrella of power play, where one partner takes on a more dominant role during sex, while the other assumes a submissive role. Although this assumes a hierarchy of power, it's better to characterize bondage sex as an open dialogue to negotiate behaviors and achieve mutual enjoyment from physical and psychological stimulation. Now, when you allow somebody to tie you up or do anything to you that is involving bondage, that's a lot of trust you've placed in that person. You placed a lot of trust in them, because it's not easy to give up that type of power to somebody and let them just sit inside your mind and control you like that. Because it's one thing to be dominated, but it's another thing to be dominated where bondage is concerned, because you literally cannot move when you are bound. Now, I shouldn't say you literally can't move, because if it's done in a certain way, you probably still can move. But there are forms of being tied up to where your whole body is like tied up. You can't do anything. And sometimes you can't even talk, because with the ropes, there is a gag ball in place. So sometimes the dom might also use a gag ball as well. So that is a lot of trust. That's a lot of trust. That's a lot. Personally, I would love to be tied up. I don't think I would want my entire body tied up. I'm not sure. But just the thought of it, I would love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Also, it involves the consensual use of tying, restraining, or binding person with rope, handcuffs, or other items that can restrict movement. Beyond the restraint, bondage sex also involves a consensual power dynamic between a dom and a sub. Now, it's possible for a person to practice self-bondage during masturbation. Now, you can literally tie yourself up while you're masturbating, if you can, and you can see how that will work for you, but I'm not sure, because I've never tried that. I didn't even know that was a thing until I read it in this article. So that's something new to me. Y'all, this is very interesting. It's so much stuff that I have left to tell y'all, but I can't really get it all in because, wait, I might be able to get it all in. I take that back. Let's see if I can. Now, during a 2017 study, roughly 1 in 5 Americans has engaged in bondage play. Another 2017 study adds that the interest in BDSM is present in most of the general population. And this is despite its prevalence of people who have viewed this practice as subversive, taboo, and an indication of being psychologically unwell. So there are people who actually think that because you are into this, that something is wrong with you mentally. Because why would you want to be dominated and have gag balls in your mouth and be tied up and handcuffed and spanked and flogged and whipped. And why would you want these things? Like, why would you want that? Something has to be wrong with you upstairs. But really, what people don't understand is that it's a turn on. Like, people like this shit. And there's nothing wrong with someone who enjoys a different form of sexual gratification when it comes to, where BDSM is concerned. There's nothing wrong with that. And if there's something that you like or you're interested in, don't let anybody make you feel like you're weird because you like it. It's very erotic. And when you find the right person to engage in it with, it can be very, very gratifying. Very gratifying. Now, where did I leave off? Okay, so now, but the narrative in recent years has shifted, and many experts now view consensual BDSM activities as a relatively common and healthy form of intimacy. 58.9% of males and 54.4% of females practice BDSM bondage sex, and they list it as one of their favorite BDSM activities. Okay, so yeah, there you go. Those are the numbers. There are a lot of people out here walking around that you probably even talk to that you don't even know like this type of shit. You have no idea that they're into this. None. You'll be amazed at the type of shit people are into and don't even look like they like certain stuff. You'll be surprised. You will be surprised at the kind of shit people like to do behind closed doors. Okay? Now, evidence suggests that participating in BDSM leads to an altered state of consciousness called subspace. Now, people describe it as a floaty high state that subs experience during and after the play. Using restraints may produce a feeling of sensory deprivation. It may not only help increase a person's excitement, but it can enhance sensation of the remaining senses, which can heighten pleasure. So even though it's like you're cutting off something, you're also adding to it at the same time, which might not seem like it makes any sense, but when you're in the moment, you can like understand what I'm saying better. Now, it's listed. Okay, BDS, bondage and disciplined sex, has been said to build deeper connections. It heals relationships, and it improves sexual and mental health. Fewer sexual and mental problems have been reported, from people who practice this type of sex. Now, it also says that it's a safe space for people healing from trauma, PTSD, and abuse. Now, if you are healing from those things, it's okay for you to get into this type of play. But if you're experiencing this type of trauma and you're not getting help and you're not healing in any type of way, do not participate in this. And only participate in it if you're experiencing these things under the guidance of a professional, like a medical professional. Do not try to take this on yourself because it's not going to go well for you. I'm not a doctor, but I know that for a fact. You have to be doing the work to get over something. If you want to participate, to get over those things, rather, if you want to participate in this, but you need the help of a medical professional who can guide you and take you slowly, step by step through the process. The possible risks of bondage sex are injury and fatality. You have to be extremely familiar with the equipment that you're using before you use it. You don't want to be trying to use stuff on people and you learning as you go. This is not one of those things. You need to know what the fuck you're doing before you get started. Okay? So you don't have any injuries or fatalities. And on that note, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I'm going to mosey on along my way. I hope to talk to y'all in the next episode. I end up dropping it very soon. But until then, in the meantime, in between time, have some sex, y'all. Even if you're solo dolo or with somebody or with somebody's, have a lot of orgasms, y'all. Have a lot of those motherfuckers. And I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.